Pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the study on the expenditure plans and effectiveness of their implementation by the Department of Fisheries and Ocean, I call the meeting to order. I'd like to welcome our witnesses: Larry Murray, Deputy Minister; George DuPont, Commissioner, Canadian Coast Guard; David Bevan, Assistant Deputy Minister, Fisheries and Aquaculture Management; and Carl Haig, the Acting Deputy Minister, Human Resources and Corporate Services. And of course, I'd like very much to welcome the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans, the Honourable Iola Hearn, to the meeting today. Welcome, Minister.
Thank you, sir.
And I'd ask our members are mostly here. There's a few getting coffee yet, but I'd ask the Minister or witnesses to proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Certainly a pleasure to be back to review my department's operations. As always, I'll keep my remarks very brief, and those of you who've known me over the years in this committee, I say very little. You've already introduced my officials. We do have some other people here for the simple reason that usually at committee people have technical questions pertinent to certain divisions of the department. And we try to have people here who can provide an answer. Any we can't, certainly we'll get to you very quickly. Last time we met, we discussed in some detail a few of the concerns you had about supposed cutbacks in funding and personnel. I trust that between the meeting and the subsequent questions put to my officials last week, you now have the answers you require. For the record, let me emphasize that overall funding for my department has increased, not decreased. You might have seen that I have had to clarify this fact with the media, since they had picked up particular similar reports, likely stemming from a misunderstanding on how the budgetary and planning cycles work. This increase includes an additional $99 million to improve critical services in science, fisheries, fish habitat management and Coast Guard programs, all of which we can touch on in more detail today. In British Columbia, for instance, we have increased the number of fisheries enforcement staff from 162 to 176 and have added 12 new habitat monitors, allowing our fisheries officers to focus on their work on the Fraser and in the Pacific coastal areas. That in itself, Mr. Chair, is significant, not only the increase in direct protection officers, but by providing the new habitat officers, our enforcement people can now do the job they were sent out to do rather than having to worry about who puts in the culvert. We have further deployed 27 fishery officer recruits across the Atlantic provinces. This is the first significant recruitment of fisheries officers since 2003, and an additional recruitment and training is planned for 2007. That said, there are still changes. How do we protect and promote the commercial fishery both from an ecological and economic perspective? I don't believe the two to be mutually exclusive, but it is a tremendous balancing act to ensure that both our fish stocks and our stakeholders survive and prosper. And as much as we would like quick fixes, that's just not possible. But that does not mean the situation of the fishery isn't urgent. It is. The economic value of the fishery to Canada is considerable, with exports worth $4.3 billion in 2005, and the recreational fishery, and this might just open up eyes, I know it certainly did mine, a recreational fishery valued at more than $7 billion. The fishery employs over 100,000 people and remains crucial to the economic prosperity of coastal Canada. But the economic and ecological pressures on the resource also remain intense and challenging. The fishery must change or it will not survive. It means getting good conservation right, getting governance right, and getting the economics and the infrastructure right. That leads me to our fisheries renewal agenda. We continue to work hard to cooperate and consult with our provincial and territorial colleagues. You may recall last May I participated in the Premier Summit in Newfoundland and Labrador, where we discussed a cross-section of complex fisheries issues. That consultation didn't end here. What has now become part of a fishing industry renewal initiative continues as we speak. It will focus on policy renewal and industry restructuring. A follow-up series of consultations will take place with harvesters, processors and plant workers, and we anticipate their recommendations by year's end. Incidentally, I also met with my other Atlantic counterparts last July in Charlottetown to discuss the plight of the Northumberland Strait fishers, and just last week met with my colleagues in Quebec to discuss their unique concerns. The topics on the table included commercialisation, processing and harvesting. We committed at those meetings to identify and implement whatever short-term solutions are possible before the 2007 season. Before I leave the matter of federal-provincial cooperation, let me share with you two initiatives we have undertaken, one dealing with conservation and the other with economics. We are committed to conserving and restoring wild Atlantic salmon and its habitat on the Atlantic coast. To that end, we are moving forward on the Atlantic Salmon Endowment Fund. As I announced earlier this month in Fredericton, the fund itself is a $30 million conditional grant that will be invested, and the income earned will be used to support projects that contribute to salmon conservation and restoration. On the economic side of the fisheries equation, in late October, I and my Newfoundland and Labrador counterparts joined representatives of Cook Aquaculture to announce more than $155 million in funding to establish an aquaculture development project. DFO share is $4.5 million and comes by way of our Aquaculture Collaborative Research and Development Programme. This project is expected to triple the province's salmon production and create over 2,000 full-time, year-round direct jobs, as well as additional indirect jobs in the aquaculture processing, supply and service sectors. And I should mention, it's in the writing of my colleague from Buren Burgio, along that coast where they've been hit extremely hard over the last couple of years, and it could be turned around for that area. This investment is exactly the type of shot in the arm that this area needs and will create the critical mass necessary to position the aquaculture industry in Newfoundland and Labrador. Of course, cooperation and consultation are no less important on the international front. I was in Iceland and Norway just 2 weeks ago to speak to the never-ending fight against illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing in the North Atlantic. We also discussed how to ensure decisions are based on science and how NAFO might integrate precautionary and ecosystem-based approaches in its decision-making, and we had lengthy conversations on the fishery which we share, and that's the seal fishery. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I would like to say a few words about science renewal. Our oceans agenda, small crafts harbours and Coast Guard modernisation. The need for sound scientific advice is critical to my department and our government. We have invested an additional $15.5 million in science to get a clear picture of what's happening to fish and fish habitat. We believe in the role of sound science as a way to better inform our fishers, habitat and oceans management decisions. DFO will continue to lead the implementation of the government-wide Oceans Action Plan in order to advance integrated oceans management in Canada's Atlantic, Pacific and Arctic oceans. To that end, the Department establishes regional implementation committees in each of the OIP priority areas, and I announced a Smart Bay demonstration project to showcase Canada's ocean technology expertise. We also recognise the importance of providing commercial fishers with solid infrastructure through Small Crafts Harbours programme. I will continue working to maintain this important programme while realising that funding pressures are many. And lastly, Mr. Chairman, I want to ensure the people who work so hard in the Coast Guard to keep us safe have what they need to do their jobs. We have already increased funding by $45 million per year, and in addition to the more than $270 million dedicated to fleet renewal. And we will proceed with the Aids to Navigation for the 21st Century initiative to provide the right combination of conventional, and electronic aids to help stakeholders and members of the public safety navigate our waters. I mentioned the jobs in relation to the South Coast starting off a couple of hundred, but that can easily go. We've been told estimates anywhere from 2 to 5, even up to 8,000 in aquaculture in Atlantic Canada, and particularly on the south coast of Newfoundland. That's pretty positive stuff. Thank you for listening, Mr. Chair, and certainly we'd be pleased to take any questions.
Thank you, Minister Hearn. Perhaps before we start, I'd just like to thank yourself and your department, certainly for appearing here today, and thank you for your planned financial and human resources updates for 2006, 2007, 2008, and 2009. And I'd also like to express our appreciation for the very short return on our request of November 21st and your provision from your Department of Information for the detailed breakdown of funding for the National Capital Region, national programs, details on DFO's involvement in environmental assessment and construction of the bridge at Rivière des Prairies, and a detailed description of how science is funded, the role of Science Management Committee, and the chart that DFO officials used during the hearing that showed budget increases for the Department of 1996 onwards. That's a 7-day turnaround on that information, and it was needed by the committee to pursue this hearing today, so we appreciate your prompt reply. We'll go to our first questioner, Mr. Byrne, or Mr. Cuzner?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Minister, and you know, I guess, and I commented before when you appeared before the committee, it's always a pleasure to have you here, and certainly it's interesting to find out that you know, how things have changed. The view of the room where you used to sit in this chair from where you're sitting in that chair, the view of the room has changed, and it's interesting to find out maybe how your view of some issues might have changed over the last number of months, I guess. Atlantic Salmon Endowment Fund, I know that I addressed this question to Mr. Murray last week and tried to seek some clarification as to just the difference between the announcement that was made when yourself, Regional Minister Thompson, and Ecole Minister McKay made the announcement of the investment in Atlantic salmon in Fredericton last month. The difference between that announcement and the announcement that was made a year prior, the workup that was made the year prior, where there was an agreement ready to be signed, and then we were thrown into the election. Is there a great difference in what was being done to what the eventual deal was linked and the initiative going forward? If you could identify the number of differences, maybe.
I think there is just mainly one, Mr. Chair. The former government, if you want to look at the budgetary process, brought a promise, we brought a check.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the absence of a real answer, I guess that'll do. Was there any difference from what was being done, though, Minister? Is it essentially the same? Because I think it's something, and you were part of this committee. You know, the member from Sackville Eastern Shore, Musquodoboit, pushed hard, although he voted against the budget that we allocated the $30 million, and he voted against that. But still, he's been a strong advocate. But this committee, in essence, is the program the same?
Generally, it is, and most of the players are the same. For instance, a number of the people who were nominated for the board, the thing was, this was talked about in theory, and no real money was put on the table, and we, you know, we brought the money. I was serious when I said that. Other than that, like, we didn't go in to try to change the world at all. We worked closely with people involved with STEM, like people like Bill Taylor, as you know, on the East Coast, others who have led the fight in the different provinces. I mean, the people who met us. First time I heard about this was when you, I guess, and the chair and others were touring Atlantic Canada, and we had presentations on the need to do something for wild salmon. and out of that it was the push of the committee undoubtedly that got this idea moving. The fact that we had done it on the West Coast, and it's just as important on the East Coast, and we followed through on that. We picked it up immediately after we had come in, got it through the process so that the work can now begin. Other than that, we haven't really made any changes or asked the committee or those involved to do anything different except do the work that they want to do, and we're just here to help.
Just my closing comment on I understand that the check had been cut, but we just didn't know who to make it out to, and the Atlantic Salmon Conservation Foundation has stepped forward, and so we're really happy that, and I know that the committee's happy that that program is up and running. If I could get a couple of comments. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Minister.
No, that's okay, except, the check wasn't really cut.
Had the money been booked, maybe Mr. Murray can, because he was there for both announcements. I think he was present for both announcements. So.
I can't get into whether the money's booked or not
okay.
booked. In fact, I usually don't know whether it's booked or not, quite frankly.
Mr. Minister, just with the allocation, and there seems to be more money in Coast Guard. There seems to be, there's an appearance of that anyway. But what we're seeing is, and I know that you've long advocated a stronger presence on the nose and tail of the Grand Banks and on the Flemish Cap, and greater resources to be applied there. What we're seeing now with acquisition of vessels, we're seeing that there's some concern now and maybe some unforeseen delays. Is any of this can we attribute any of this to the fact that now with trying to exert some additional presence in the Arctic with new vessels that are going to be armed in the Arctic, is there a conflict with what we're trying to do in the Flemish Cap and in the Arctic?
No, Mr. Chair, but that's a very good topic to discuss. First of all, you started off by saying that we're seeing an increased presence and extra attention being paid to Coast Guard. The credit for that I give to this committee and some of the people who are around this table. I believe it was the major study that was done, and there are people here today from both sides of Coast Guard. We have the Commissioner and we have the head of one of the major unions in the audience. These people realized that it was a collective effort, and we had very good cooperation as we went around. People came forward and laid the cards on the table. Our report, I believe the government and the push of the day and the push that we made collectively got the ball rolling, and we've been able to keep it rolling. To me, as we said then, and I know to a lot of you, Coast Guard in this country is an icon, and one which has tremendous potential. We have increased our presence actually on the nose and tail and the Flemish Cap, but in the meantime we are increasing our presence generally. Like right now we have 8 smaller boats going to be built. Some are in Canada. We have some larger boats being built. When we talked about armed presence, this is not from our shop or from Coast Guard. We're hearing that from D&D. But let me just say that all of us collectively, and I'm not just talking about government members, I think I speak for maybe everybody here, realize that we need to strengthen our presence in the north, but we don't need to reinvent the wheel. And some of the ideas that are being kicked around about what's needed, etc., we can remind anybody. Actually, we can put out a map that shows, as we speak today, we have 7 or 8 icebreakers in the north doing the job in relation to the communication challenge and the search and rescue and scientific work. Coast Guard is called upon to do an awful lot of stuff. We can do an awful lot more. You know, if there was I don't see any, a plan of attack from the north, certainly that in the near future. But if we do need presence at any one time, working with D&D to coordinate activities and maybe using some of the Coast Guard boats, that can easily be done. Basically what I'm saying, yes, we need a presence. We will have an increased presence. If the north is going to be opened up and developed, I believe Coast Guard has a major part to play. But this is an add-on, and why some of the money you see here, like $275 million plus, for repairing the fleet and moving forward. It's not to replace anything or to substitute, it's to enhance, and certainly, as long as I'm around anyway, the attention being paid to the nose and tail and the Flemish cap and the offshore Atlantic Canada certainly won't be lessened.
One more question. Okay, one more question. And I'll ask a question. I've got a fellow Cape Bretoner in the audience today who's the chairman of the National Association of Fishing Harbors, and I think he'd be interested to know, and you being a former educator in your past career, you'll be able to walk me through this, that you've indicated that you've put additional resources in small craft harbors, but it clearly states in the revised plan spending that for 06-07 we're looking at $96.6 million, and going forward to 07-08 $76.8 million, then down to $73.7 million. So I wasn't the greatest math student at St. FX, but explain to me how that's an increase from 96 down to 73.
Mr. Chair, he mentioned that I was an educator, and the one thing about educating, you can only work with what you have. However, his math is good. The thing is, and I'm sure you realize that with budget, like projections, you project up based upon basically what you have today, and if you're given, like we were given, we got, and some of you again ran the committee, my very first day on the Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans, I introduced the topic of infrastructure and talked about the need, and it led to the committee deciding to do a report, which it did. We had our Small Crafts Harbours director come in and quite openly laid it on the table that we would need $400 million to bring our wharves up to par, our own solely owned wharves, 21 or 23% or something unsafe. All of us put on the push, a good report again, and we got $100 million put into the budget. So for the last 5 years, we have had $20 million a year, which sort of now ends. We got extra money put in this past year on top of that. Our hope, of course, is to be able to build on that as we move forward in our overall fisheries plan, which we do have, because...
I am going to cut you off,
just to cut
because you're out of time.
What's the magic number? What can we expect?
We appreciate the question, Mr. Kozner,
okay,
and we appreciate the Minister's attempt to answer, but you're going to have to wait to the next round because you're a minute over, and everyone wants a turn to ask the question here. Monsieur Blais, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I think that you won't have to come back on the issue because I want to continue in the same vein. I am one of the newer generation in terms of what's happened, I think, with small craft harbors. But there are two subjects I'd like to look at with you, and one of them is small craft harbors. I say, unfortunately, that what happened in Quebec was unfortunate in your performance I'm referring to last Friday. For small craft harbors, I would have expected that with the supplementary budget you might have been able to ensure that the motion that was unanimously carried in the House of Commons that recognizes the need to substantially increase the budget for small craft harbors. I had the impression that you were going to take that ball and run with it and add something in the supplementary budget. We talked about the minimum of $35 million per year that was voted in the House of Commons. And so just at the outset, I have to say that I was somewhat surprised. We've been asking questions on this issue for a long time now, and it would have been nice to see you take advantage of that unanimous vote in the House as far as this issue is concerned. It hasn't happened often on this subject, and I'm just wondering, first of all, why that didn't happen, and secondly, I'd like to know what your intentions are on this.
I'm well aware of Mr. Blais's interest in small crafts harbours from being on the committee with him, certainly from every meeting I attended, whether we're talking about small crafts harbours, whether we're talking about fish generally, or whether we're talking about chicken farming. Mr. Blais will bring in the wharf as he should because he represents the fishing area. In relation to Quebec, I would say to him that the meeting set up in Quebec by the Minister of Fisheries from Quebec, who did a tremendous job, Mr. Chair, and we had a great meeting. The meeting was not set up for me or for the provincial minister to go and give out a pile of information to solve all the problems. The meeting was called so that industry, everybody involved, will come to discuss openly the concerns, the challenges that we have to face, and to go forward so they would have their input into what needs to be done, to outline areas of where expenditure would be needed, to outline areas where we can consolidate, where we can improve, where we can collectively come up with an ocean to plate strategy. So it wasn't the time to go to make any announcements. Let me say in relation to the funding, and I might come back to Mr. Cosner's answer, we are well aware, nobody is more aware than I am of the need for investment in small crafts harbours. We have, like every other department, or are working on putting our requests forward for funding. Are we going to consider looking for more money for small crafts harbours? Absolutely, yes, we are. Will we get it? We're quite confident that we'll get more money. We have to. We can talk about fishery, we can talk about marketing, we can talk about harvesting, we can talk about processing, but you're not going to get out to catch a fish if you haven't got a wharf to leave from. So, I mean, we have to be, sensible there. So, consequently, Mr. Chair, yes, we are not at all forgetting the fact that small crafts harbours is an important section, nor are we forgetting the fact not only does it have to be maintained, if we're going to just maintain what we have, enhance, and if we're going to be able to set a framework to operate what we see as a solid base for a solid industry, then infrastructure has to be looked upon as a key component, and that is generally where we're headed.
Monsieur le Ministre, combien avez-vous l'intention?
Well, Mr. Minister, how much do you intend to ask for small craft harbours? How much?
I think I will ask the officials to talk about the budgetary process, and as the estimates and the budget unfolds, certainly that answer will be quite clear, but somebody might want to just explain the technical side of going forward on this.
Well, we would need to prepare a submission. The submission would express estimates, and the estimates that were given last week are the department's estimates of what is required to run a program of 750 core fishing harbors, plus 7 new harbors in Nunavut, and to effect divestiture of the harbors that need to be divested within a 5-year period of time, a reasonable period of time. As I said last week, the overall number there is I'll try not to confuse numbers, but it's the $20 million continuation. It would be $35 million on top of the 20, so that's $55 million a year ongoing. $82 million is our estimate of the money required to do a divestiture within a 5-year period. And the joint study that we did with Nunavut, I think the number was about $40.8 million for seven critical ports in Nunavut, recognizing these numbers because of construction costs and so on escalating may be somewhat changing, but it's the same numbers as last week would be the departmental estimate of what's required.
Well, yes, I don't want to get into a discussion of interpretation of the figures to understand the situation, but your department and you, Minister, I'd like to hear it directly from you. Do you agree with the fact that the financial objective that we want to attain for small craft harbors is to obtain $410 million, according to the estimates that were provided in 2005, to do the work that needs to be done.
Mr. Chair, simply because we figure this is what it will take, as the Deputy just mentioned, to do the job that has to be done, to keep what we have, to enhance that in accordance with the resolution passed in the House, but also looking at the fact that we have a number of wharves which have to be divested. We also have the Nunavut. So yes, that's the kind of money that we need. That's the kind of money we're going after, and it'll be a government decision in what time frame I guess we can achieve that. Realizing not only within government but also within our own department that there are other requirements, and we have to balance that within the total budget. There's not much. I mentioned we need a wharf to go fishing, but there's not much good of having a wharf if you can't properly harvest, process, or sell your product. So we have to look at all in total mix.
Thank you, Minister Hearn. Mr. Stauffer.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Minister, and your staff for appearing for us today. Just a couple of quick questions. The other day, this committee moved a report, which was then passed by the House of Commons, on marine service fees for north of 60, that they be immediately removed. I'm just wondering, Mr. Minister, or if Mr. DuPont can answer, has your department instructed either transport or whomever that those fees be removed immediately?
The instruction certainly hasn't been given at this stage. The resolution passed in the House undoubtedly is moving through the system, and sooner or later it will come to us to be dealt with. But Mr. DuPont might want to add to that.
Yes, thank you, Minister. As I think the committee is aware, we're engaged with discussions with industry throughout the country, including with the North, on the future of marine service fees. Those discussions are going quite well, and we're hopeful we can get an option that will be acceptable to all concerned. So that's at the moment the vehicle that we're using to address the concerns of the Northerners as well as those in other parts of the country.
Thank you. And could you please, Mr. DuPont or Mr. Minister, regarding the status of the recapitalization of the fleet? We've understood that there's X number of dollars going into it, but Mr. DuPont, when you were before us last time, you had indicated that the vessels for the Coast Guard replacement, which the previous minister, Mr. Regan, had talked about, would be built in Canada. We're just wondering if you could tell us the status of the process now. Where, like, in other words, where are we now at this stage?
Okay.
No, serious.
Okay. There's two separate projects. One is to procure 8 midshore patrol vessels. The request for proposal for those vessels was in fact issued, I believe, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And if the process unfolds as anticipated, I expect that we'll enter into a contract relatively early in the new year, and we're still hopeful that the delivery of the first vessel will be in late 2008 or early 2009. The other project is for the replacement of the 2 offshore science vessels. That one is getting close to the request for proposal being issued. I'm hopeful that that will happen in the first few months of next year, with a contract before the end of the year. And again, we're still very hopeful for delivery of the first of those vessels in late 2011, early 2012, as we had anticipated.
Thank you.
Stauffer, just to add to that, part of your question was where anything we build will be built in Canada, unless the people who build boats say to us, I can't build it.
Yeah. That's very good to hear. Minister, as you know, the Prime Minister in a previous discussion indicated that there would be an inquiry on the Fraser River the 2004 season. This would obviously involve your department quite extensively. I'm just wondering, when would the people of BC expect that inquiry to take place?
Again, it was a call by the government, more so than our department. As you know, what shall I say, the initiatives that have to be taken to put it together have already started. The wheels are turning within government. I understand they're looking for an independent judge or chair who can not saying that all judges are not independent, but a judge who could do the job. From our own perspective, we will be involved and heavily. We have a lot of other things on our plate, so if you ask, are we sorry it sort of dragged a bit? Not while all the other issues were on, because it would take, of course, a lot of time and attention. We have had 2 studies since that was first talked about, also our own, and the Standing Committee and the Williams study. But it was a commitment by government. It has been put into action, and when the announcement will be made, I really can't say.
Thank you, sir. And when
Mr. Stauffer.
Yes. Mr. Sprout was before us before, and we showed him estimates that showed a reduction over 2 years of 45 habitat enforcement officers on the West Coast. And he indicated that that indeed was going to happen. So I'm just wondering, your overall budgetary process shows a $200 million decrease overall in DFO spending. Can you explain to me why, in the advent of more critical information and everything else, that even Mr. Sprout agreed that there will be a reduction of 45 habitat officers on the West Coast? I'm just wondering how DFO can justify a reduction of that many people, plus the appropriate budget to that, when in essence we need more enforcement and habitat protection in order to protect the vital resources of the West Coast.
I think you will see, and again I'll ask one of the officials to give you the breakdown on the numbers, but if you look at that, at actually what has been happening, it's been the complete reverse of that. We added a number of new enforcement officers this year, as well as adding a number of new habitat enforcement officers. But Mr. Bevan,
Minister, perhaps Mr. Stauffer could pick up on that in his next round of questioning. Mr. Lunny.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, welcome the Minister and officials to the committee. We certainly all appreciate your being here to address the concerns of committee and the community that is very much engaged in our oceans and fisheries issues. I am glad personally, Minister, to hear that we're investing more money in science. There's a desperate need in that area, and I understand it's about $15.5 million increase in investment in that area. Increased investment in habitat and enforcement, which we feel is extremely important. And I personally like to see the habitat improvements that we've had in our area, some salmon enhancement programs we've been having that are very good in improving returns to local rivers and streams, so we appreciate the participation of DFO in those projects. And also the investment in small craft harbors, because we certainly have big needs in that area after sort of years of infrastructure being let go. I guess on the science area, a question that has come up recently involves marine protected areas. And we had a visit recently in my office, and I know I've been visiting the Hill here from the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society with Dr. Manfred Krautner concerning a rather interesting discovery of a type of glass sponges that are unique to the west coast of Vancouver Island and the coast of British Columbia. I wonder, in the discussions about marine protected areas, is the department looking at the glass sponges and the uniqueness of the coastal area and how that might impact our programs regarding both the fishing activities and the marine protected areas that are under discussion?
Mr. Chair, again, through you to Mr. Lunny, thank you for the question. Habitat is extremely important and becoming much more important, and I will think in the new Act, when it's tabled, you will see that a lot of attention is being paid to habitat and the ability to be able to work with a lot of others, or a lot more freedom to work with others. I've been meeting with most of the provincial governments throughout the country, the ministers involved, the ministers of environment, fisheries, water stewardship, etc., etc. Everyone has major concern about habitat, and we have been working with our own Department of Environment federally, with natural resources, etc., but also with the provinces to talk about coordination, eliminating duplication, eliminating cost, eliminating time frame in one waiting for somebody else to do, what you will probably be doing yourself again afterwards. Proper coordination, bringing people around the table, save time, effort, money, and get a lot more done. In relation to the marine protected areas, again, the ones we have been involved in, the response has been phenomenal. As they are being done, however, it can't be done with the heavy-handed government just coming in and drawing circles, as might have been tried sometimes in the past, where we got a lot of pushback from the local people and fishermen, etc. These have to be done in consultation with the local areas and based on good scientific advice. We are all for protecting the habitat, and we talked about that even at an international level. However, we also must remember that we have people who make a living from the marine environment, and that there has to be a balance. It's great to say that the easiest way to protect the ocean habitat is close everything down, but that would certainly affect an awful lot of people and an awful lot of communities and the economic future of the country. So what we try to do is to work with the groups, the agencies, the communities of interest involved. On the one on the west coast, the glass sponges has certainly come up, and maybe somebody can give us a little more specific. Mr. Murray has some more specific information on that.
I met with the same group. The video is wonderful, and we're working with them to actually provide it more broadly in terms of the actual protection. We did provide fisheries restrictions in the area in 2002. We expanded it in 2006. We're working with them and others. Marine Protected Area is one vehicle. There may be other vehicles, and the Government of BC is involved as well. But we agree entirely, and the Minister has been clear on the need to protect vulnerable marine areas. So we are dealing with that with urgency. One bit of information that group did provide as well is there are a number of much smaller coral reefs in the Strait of Georgia as well, and at the moment we need to, with some urgency, look at those and see if we need to put some additional protection and do a footprint of what's actually happening in that area in terms of the nature of the activity.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm sure there will be many people be interested in our looking at especially unique habitat and species, and we all have an interest in seeing unique areas protected while we go on with our other activities. We don't have our regional director for British Columbia, Mr. Sprout, with us here today, but Mr. Bevan, perhaps you'd be able to help us with this. I know some concerns regarding, specific to my riding, on a big run on the Alberni Inlet, both Sockeye and Chinook. And the sports sector is particularly important to this community, Port Alberni. It was one of the salmon capitals of the world, you know. We do have a competing community on the east side of the island, Campbell River, that claims that title as well. But the sporties in particular are concerned about the Chinook. This past year, we had this big salmon derby. That's a very big economic driver in the community, but the commercial Chinook fishery opened prior to the sports one, and frankly, the fishermen were out in those boats with high hopes, and the catch wasn't very good. I think they've missed their sport, even though conservation methods, our targets were hit. The sporties actually missed their targets by 50% the last 2 years, and that does have quite an economic impact. I just wanted you to take note of that. I wonder whether you could, look into that and comment whether or not you're taking consideration of that. And also, they're asking for multi-sectoral sockeye committee to review the catchments there, because again, I think there's a need to look at the escapement targets, which were way beyond what they were anticipated.
Yes, on the Chinook and Coho, we have a policy that provides the sports fish sector the priority and access on that. So we'll have to look into the timing of the fisheries and whether that had a bearing on their ability to access an appropriate amount of fish that is there for the priority of the sports fish recreational fishing sector. On the sockeye, I'll have to look into that one and get back to you on that.
Yeah, just to let you know on behalf of the constituents, so there's a big concern in that particular area that this it seems odd that the commercial sector, which gets the lowest value for their fish, would have priority access, as it turned out in this particular case, to scoop so much of the resource when the high value sector was underrepresented. So I just want to put that on the record for consideration.
We'll certainly look into it, and it may have been a timing issue. The timing of the fishery of the commercial sector may have been being done in a way that ended up removing the opportunity for the sports, and we'll have to take a look at that for future seasons.
Recognizing that the fish aren't always arriving in the time schedules that they used to, and water temperatures influence these things, but It's certainly a factor when the fish aren't where the fishermen are, and they're very restricted on where they can go. And their request would be that the commercial fishery be withheld till after Labor Day, when they have the big salmon derby. It's a big economic driver in the community. Minister.
Mr. Chair, just to a couple of little points there I think we have to be very conscious about, and I fully understand that, and we can argue the value. You know, when we looked at the value of the fishery to the country, look at the value of the recreational fishery. However, two things. Number one, when we're concerned that there might be too many escapements, if we're going to have a fishery of the future, conservation has to come first. And if it happens when we break down who got what, our first aim in the fishery is conservation. How many fish do we have to leave in the water to spawn in order to build our stocks? That's first. After that, then we have food, social, ceremonial, and commercial, recreational, etc. However, conservation has to come first, and if we're going to make a mistake, let's make a mistake by leaving a little bit more than less, because we'll pay the price down the road. In relation to commercial versus recreation, and this argument goes on, from a purely personal perspective, coming from a boat and a family where you either caught some fish or you didn't eat, as simple as that. So we have the commercial fishermen generally. Now you can throw names around of, international corporations, etc. Generally, the person catching the fish in the boat, that is his only source of living. The person who comes in and leaves more money than maybe this fisherman makes in the local town to catch 3 salmon, that's a great argument. Until we can find some way for that fisherman in the boat to be able to sell each salmon for whatever the value of somebody else, that's pretty hypothetical at this stage. So commercial fisheries exist because for 500 years people have fished in this country and have made a living. And if we're going to take that living away from them, somebody had better come up with some good ideas as to what the fellows in the boat are going to do before we start making major shifts in any other direction.
Yeah, well, Minister, I'd be certainly sympathetic to that perspective as well. In this case, we're talking about seiners that are taking large volumes.
Thank you, Mr. Lunny.
I did have one more good question.
Yeah, and that's very good, but you'll have to save it to the next round. I apologize to my committee members. I'm just trying to make it fair for everyone here today. Mr. Byrne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to you, Minister, and to your esteemed officials. It's great to have you here. It's too bad that our friend and colleague, Mr. Cummins, couldn't be here to liven things up a little bit as well, but I'm sure that he'll be back. But to try and liven things up a little bit, Mr. Minister, I will not direct this question to you, but to your Deputy Minister. This committee has been engaged in a serious study on vessel safety and DFO's boat length requirements. We had expert witnesses appear from DFO on that topic, as well as Transport Canada. And at the time, we heard testimony that basically there were 2 separate issues. And while there was some collaboration between Transport Canada and DFO, largely they were not necessarily linked or related, and that the 2 departments were acting independently. That was generally the consensus of the testimony that was given. 10 days or 9 days later, we understand, as a result of hearing expert testimony in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, from industry stakeholders, that there was the night before a memorandum of understanding that was signed between Transport Canada and DFO to collaborate on vessel safety and boat length requirements. Do you think it was appropriate, Mr. Murray, that the committee, this parliamentary committee, was not informed that that memorandum of understanding was being drafted or being considered, and its contents or its draft contents not divulged to parliamentary members?
No, I don't think it was inappropriate. I don't recollect I don't know how many MOUs I've been involved in a 43-year career, but I don't recollect bringing each and every one of them. In fact, I don't remember bringing any of them to parliamentary committees for approval. I think the initiative is very...
The question, it was not seeking approval. We was informing the committee that was conducting a very serious study on a very serious issue on vessel safety, boat replacement and vessel length. At the time, we were conducting a very serious study, and obviously Transport Canada and DFO were both in collaboration and discussions on an effort to work together on this, and that was contrary to the testimony that we were hearing, or at the very least, the spirit of the testimony at the time. So you don't feel, notwithstanding the fact that you have obviously been involved in many memorandums of understanding, that at the time that a standing committee of the House of Commons was conducting a very serious study on this issue, you felt no obligation or no consideration to bring that information, that was actually in play and in existence at the time.
We had every intention of keeping the committee in the picture on vessel safety. The minister has been very clear on this. The minister's direction has been very clear to the department that we need to put a focus on this. The MOU is a direct result of that direction. The committee's interest in this area has been extremely helpful, but certainly it was not my intention or the department's intention to somehow not inform the committee in any way, shape, or form. In fact, we welcome the inquiry, and certainly the forum and every one of the fora actually that the minister has co-chaired with provincial colleagues for the most part have got into this issue of vessel size. So in that context, I think this is actually a question, not a specific question, but the question of vessel safety is very definitely a question for the minister, since he's given very clear direction to the department to move on in this, and the MOU is one result of that.
Just to add to that, this has been an issue coming again out of this very committee over the years, that we had always argued about restrictions that were put on boats, and all of us have described the boats that are going out and up rather than lengthwise, and we always question safety. We've had a couple of incidents in Newfoundland where certainly stability is in question. Now, stability because the operators don't know how to properly use it, or stability because the design is wrong, and you can argue till the cows come home. The thing is, we probably have boats going to sea that I certainly wouldn't go across the harbour in, and that's a bit scary. I might go across the harbour, but having said that, we have been working like from day one, and in fact, coming out of the summit meetings, we would have probably already have something out publicly that we'll be talking about today in relation to flexibility on boat length, etc. But when we started the summit meetings where we're bringing all of industry to the table, it's much better to let them have their spin too than a made in Ottawa solution, even though our solutions are usually made through committees and information that comes from the field. The MOU that you're talking about, actually, it wasn't something that was slapped together because this became an issue. It's been on the go for quite some time, and in fact I had it for some time before we even signed off to make sure that we could all live up to what we're talking about and that there would be cooperation.
Minister, I appreciate your candor on the issue and the commitment to keep the committee informed of activities, especially since they've been underway for quite some time, as you say, and we certainly appreciate the witnesses presenting us with this information and with the actual draft, the actual signed memorandum of understanding, as opposed to DFO or Transport Canada bringing it forward. I'll go to a question.
And we appreciate you getting that out,
science,
Mr. Byrne. But your time is up, so we're going to go on to Mr. Aslan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I wanted to take advantage of the minister's presence here. As we're discussing the Coast Guard and other fisheries oceans, I appreciate that he has brought his senior staff with him. During your last answer, Mr. Minister, you confirmed that you are very concerned and that you have good intentions in terms of marine safety. You said that at Havre Saint-Pierre, at the request of the Fishermen's Association and the marina staff and management in the whole region of Sept-Îles and Havre Saint-Pierre, boats go out April 1st for the beginning of the fishing season. But now the Coast Guard is active, it's operational, around the third week of April only. So it doesn't really make any sense. The boats are on the ocean, the fishermen are preparing for their season, and the Coast Guard, which has infrastructure, they have a boat, but they have no staff to do anything in case of a catastrophe or an emergency. So, Mr. Minister, I support the mayors of the local municipalities, the associations, everyone agrees. We would like to see. And we know that all of these things are done with the best of intentions, but Minister, we would like you to please act on this. Tell your Coast Guard Commissioner that for a period of 3 weeks, which is what we're talking about here, to make our fishermen safety. Let us avoid a disaster. If we have a responsibility, clearly we have to do something about it. If something were to happen, the Coast Guard would be responsible. This is an issue I brought up during the final mandate of the previous government. You're aware of this. The Coast Guard has been made aware of this. So on behalf of the fishermen, on behalf of the people who are on the water, please do something to ensure their safety. It's not a matter of additional infrastructure. It's just an issue of having the Coast Guard operators there and ready to act if there were to ever be an accident on the 1st of April when the fishermen go out and when they're on the water. This is an issue of 2 or 3 weeks extra for the staff for operations, but the Coast Guard would be there. And Mr. Chairman, it's a little bit like as if the municipality opened the swimming pool but didn't put any lifeguards on staff to watch over the safety of the children. It's as if they came in weeks later. So that's the same kind of logic. So, Minister, you talked about safety, and this was confirmed by your deputy ministers, that this is a major concern for you. So all we're asking is that you give that direction so that Havre Saint-Pierre and the people who work in this area for the Coast Guard be on the job as of April 1st, to be there in case there is any need for them to intervene. So I've asked before, and I ask again on behalf of the fishermen, because it would be terrible if we had some accident and that no one be there to act because of such a tiny budgetary amount not having been earmarked for it. Thank you. Thank you very much for the very good question.
Raising that question, because sometimes when you talk, when you have local issues that on the large scale might be overlooked, but to the people in the area extremely important, these are the things we should always look at. I presume, again, that there is some reason why this is happening. I'll ask Mr. Dupont if he is aware of the situation. You mentioned lifeguards at the swimming pool, and the simile certainly is very appropriate. The only thing, maybe sometimes if we've made arrangements for the 3-week interim to have the parents there to supervise, the issue might be taken. So I don't know if there's some other provision, but Mr. Dupont can probably give us a direct answer, but we certainly will follow up on what you asked.
Oui, merci, Monsieur Ministre. Oui, je connais bien.
Thank you, Minister. Yes, I'm well aware of the situation there, and we are trying to find a short-term solution to the problem for the coming season. Moreover, we are also undertaking a study of all of the needs for search and rescue across the country. And as I said a few weeks ago, I hope to have the results of that study in February. And based on that analysis, and based on the opportunities that exist, we will try and settle all these situations where there are clear shortcomings. So we're looking for a short-term solution for now, and we'll use that analysis to find our long-term solutions. Thank you, Mr. Dupont.
Just ask to add to Mr. Aslan, though, if he would follow up as we get into February to get with me personally before the season. I would be glad to talk to you about it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Minister, I first of all want to thank publicly Faith Scatallong down on the East Coast. I recently had a tour of BIO, my 4th tour in 9 years, and it was extremely well done. The staff down there did a great job. One thing they impressed upon me was the fact that science, even though there was a slight increase this year, shows that it may not have the accelerated increases that we're all looking for. So if you are going to Cabinet asking for more money for science, I know on behalf of the people of BIO they would greatly appreciate that in that regard. But a couple of questions for you, sir. And If you don't have the answers now, if it's possible to get them later, it would be interesting to note the number of habitat enforcement officers for the Central Arctic region. Have they decreased over the last few years, or are they staying the same? And also on lighthouses. I know there's divestiture of lighthouses ongoing, and the Lighthouse Preservation Society of British Columbia and of Nova Scotia, for example, are looking to ensure, if at all possible, to ensure that their organizations, if indeed they're to be divested, would have first crack at maintaining a part of our history. But the question I have for you specifically, sir, is you talked about the preservation and conservation of wild salmon. I've spoken to mining companies, and in most cases around the country, mining companies, when they are in an area, they'll build a separate tailings pond. And they'll basically a hole, they'll line it, they'll put water in it, and then they'll put the tailings in there. But as you know, in a question I asked you earlier regarding Duck Pond Lake and that near the Exploits River, which both flow into the river, there's quite concern by environmental groups and fishing groups that the allowance of these lakes to be turned into tailing ponds through Schedule 2, and plus the fact that there are lakes right across the country who are next up in line, there's a concern that, I'll come right on to say it, that we're allowing the mining companies the cheaper way out of it instead of developing their own tailings pond by using a natural water system for their tailing ponds. Do you not think that this may contradict what you've said about conservation? If when you're using the precautionary principle, shouldn't the mining companies do what they do in most cases and set up their own instead of using a lake for its tailing systems? Sir.
Mr. Chair, certainly I don't think I contradicted what I said at all. In fact, if we want to go back to some of the comments I made, we talked about our concern for habitat and protecting habitat and marine conservation areas, etc., but realizing that there is a resource in the ocean on which an awful lot of people benefit and make a living from, and the country that benefits from the economy. If we cannot as a country develop our resources, if whether it be private or public sector is not allowed to develop these resources to create employment, to stimulate the economy, if we don't use our natural resources, where does a country like this get the money to move forward and provide the tremendous social programs we do? Can we have the best of both worlds? I think we can. Are we there in all cases? Probably not. And that's why I think we're becoming much more habitat conscious. And as we move forward, stronger, more stringent requirements will be placed on mines. In the case of AUR Resources, that company went through an environmental assessment. A compensation plan was put in place actually to enhance the Exploits River, provide better enhancement in that very area to make sure that any damage or loss to fish or fish habitat was offset. Sometimes you have to do those trade-offs to make sure you can have the best of both. Mr. Speaker, whenever we make decisions, we have 3 acts governing us: the Fisheries Act, the Environmental Assessment Act, Species at Risk Act. So we have legal obligations to make sure we do a good job and that we're not just doing a quick, cursory look at because it's a mining company or some big industry and say, go ahead. No, we need to create jobs, but we also need to protect habitat. We try to do the best to balance both within the legislation under which we operate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Very quickly, can you please explain resource management this year showing 105.9 and in 2 years going down to 64.7? Can you explain the decrease and what that actually means? And also, MTS Services, Marine Communication, showing 107.1 for this year, 79.8 in 2 years. Can you, if not now, can you possibly write to the committee and to our researcher what those curtail in terms of number of people and as to why the decreases in those 2 areas?
Okay, let me see if we can get these 3 answers in for you. The first one being on habitat officers, and we didn't finish on the West Coast originally, and you raised Central that time. And in relation to the lighthouses, I'm a great lighthouse supporter, so anything down there will be done with care and caution and consideration and consultation. But on the habitat officers generally and on the 2 budgetary requirements, Sue? Sorry.
Please.
The 2 questions that you asked are linked to habitat in terms of officers on the West Coast. We have managed to increase the budget for the Habitat program this year on the West Coast as a result of the $99 million in transformational funds in total that the Minister was able to achieve for the department, and the portion of that will be for Habitat on the West Coast is $1.3 million. You asked about Habitat enforcement officers in Central and Arctic, and yes, there has been a reduction. There has been a smaller reduction than was originally planned. I thought I had the number with me in terms of our actual implementation as of today, and I don't, but we'll write to you on that.
Thank you very much. Mr. Manning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome the Minister and officials from his department. Just for a point of clarification, maybe to Mr. Murray, on the small craft harbours, the $20 million is due to sunset on March 31st. Is it correct to say that the department is requesting $20 million per year be reinstated, plus an additional $35 million per year on top of the $20 million for a total of $55 million?
That is the requirement.
That's the request, is it? Okay. All right.
Well, that's the requirement. You know, the request will be built along those lines.
Okay.
That's what we need.
Oh, that's okay. I just want to point. So that's the requirement that the department put forward.
It's above and beyond the 20 that we're talking about.
Okay. All right. Minister, two questions, and I'll ask both of them now in the essence of time, and you can answer them. Concerns in Newfoundland, Labrador, I'm sure in Canada, in regards to overfishing. I know the government has taken some stands on that and some action on that. I'd like to get an update on exactly where we're to with that at the present time. And in regards to the recreational food fishery this year, which was a major hit, or certainly a major success in many parts of our province, could you elaborate on this summer's activities and any proposals or plans, or I guess in a nutshell, can the people of Newfoundland and Labrador expect to be back on the water in 2007?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Manning. On the overfishing issue, again, like when we talked about infrastructure, I guess, or the Coast Guard, Habitat, Fraser River, all of these issues were dealt with and a lot of push put on by the former committee. None more so than overfishing. It was an issue again introduced, I'm sure, over the years, but certainly reinvigorated the very first day we sat on this committee. It went through debates, it went through motions in the House, it went through all kinds of discussion. We said that we would deal with overfishing. And people say, you know, you say one thing on one side of the House and you get on the other side, you say something different. I've made it clear and will, anything I said when I was a member of this committee, and you can dig out any Hansard that covered the committees, I haven't changed my mind one little bit. I'm saying the same thing today. Have we done something about overfishing? Yes, we have. We have added to the resource, to the surveillance and so on the nose-tail Flemish cap, from an aerial point of view to an oceans point of view, something that had been started by the previous government. And in fact, a fair amount of work had been done by the previous government in that area. But what we did something that we had always said could be done.
I missed that.
If we're going to, it's in Hansard. It's in Hansard. I don't mind giving credit where credit is due. Again, thanks to the pressures
Go
of the
ahead
committee.
with your answer, Mr. Hearn.
We said that in order to stop overfishing in international waters, we needed cooperation. We always said we thought there were other countries that believed the same as we did if somebody would take the leadership and coordination to do it. The efforts by our people, when I say our people, by the people from our province who were at NAFO, from our officials who were at NAFO, from our own political people who were at NAFO this year. We spent weeks, from the first day I became minister until the NAFO meeting, planning on how we would turn around NAFO. We did, and I won't get into an NAFO it's there to look at. People think, oh, insignificant changes. Look at what's there and look at what happens the 1st of January. But we carried it further, Mr. Chair, and we took all kinds of flack this last couple of months from environmental groups about Canada's stand on bottom trawling, the same stand as the former government had, because we realised that dealing with one little aspect of technology doesn't do anything, particularly when it's completely unenforceable what people want you to do. What we were looking at was a major sustainable fisheries resolution that solidified the gains we had made at NAFO, that by taking the middle of the road position, by bringing those polarized around one little paragraph in an 80-paragraph resolution, we got them, with the help of some others, including Australia, to that centre point where we now have a major sustainable fisheries resolution going to the UN, supported by the 100 or 100 plus countries, committing to deal with the very things that we have been asking for years. So have we made major headway in dealing with overfishing and misreporting and all the other activities, and dealing with those who step outside the line? Yes, Mr. Chair, we certainly have. How do we know? Well, the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, and I think very shortly we'll see some of that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, and thank you, Mr. Manning. We're going to have to wait for another round. Mr. Macaulay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Mr. Minister, and your officials. I enjoyed your opening statement, and I'd like you to elaborate a little further on fact is, you visited the federal riding of Curdigan, and you understand, I hope, the strain that's on the fishermen that fish in the Northumberland Strait in my district. And you said that there were some short-term solutions put in place in order to deal with the major problem with what I believe is too much strain on the fishery, too many traps in the water, too many licenses in the area. Does the Minister have any thought of removing some of the licenses? And what I'm talking about is a buyout program in order to make sure that the fishermen in the Northumberland Strait that remain in the fishery have a chance to survive.
Very good question, Mr. Chair. In fact, I visited PEI several times since I've been Minister, and met with, I would say, representatives of all sectors of the fishery, toured a lot of the fishing enterprises, etc., looked at a lot of the small craft harbours in the area, visited plants, and one of the things that's evident in PEI, same as in Newfoundland, certainly in Quebec, is that we have areas, at least, of the province where the people who are dependent on the fishery are having a rough time. We also have areas in PEI, like the north side, as you know, where they've done very well and are doing very well. When there is a bit of a problem in the industry, we always go back to the old saying, Percival Copes years ago, too many people chasing too few fish. That again might be true, and we have two options, three options, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chair. One, we can take more people out to suit a dwindling resource. Second thing we can do is deal with that dwindling resource to see why it is dwindling and try to improve the resource to suit the numbers who are trying to make a living on it. And the third is to let others get involved with us in doing just that, and that's what we've been doing. That's why we had a major meeting in PEI dealing with the Northumberland Strait, where most of the problems are occurring for all kinds of reasons, perhaps. And we brought in the other provinces that are directly involved to collectively put our heads together, as we're doing in Newfoundland and as we are now doing in Quebec, getting the people who are directly involved to come up with some of the solutions. You know, is government going to solve all the problems with government programs or buyouts? We tried that before, it didn't work. And industry and the people involved will tell you that. A lot of the solutions have to come from the people involved themselves, and it would be consolidation and cooperation and coordination with government leadership and help. There's no doubt about it, we are going to have to be involved.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Did I hear that you would not be in favour of a buyout program, then, more or less?
No.
I mean, it's okay to study the program, but the people that can't make their payments can't put up with studies too long. The fact is they get bills to pay that they cannot pay, and they need help.
Let me say quite clearly that I'm not talking about studying. I have the same philosophy as studies as you do yourself, but I'm in a position to do something about it now. I don't believe in, you know, Linty Royal Commission. Look, it's been studied to death. we, and when I say we, collectively, we know what some of the solutions are, but most of them are in Cardigan, not here in Ottawa, and that's why we brought the people around the table to put together right away, to get together themselves, not to have a study done, but to get together themselves, which they have done in this process, to recommend collectively what part you play, what part you play, what part we play to deal with these very programs. Is a buyout part of it? We'll see when the results come in. Most of them figure some people will have to be taken out of the industry. What process will be used? That will be a collective call. Sometimes industry would like to self-rationalise. They'd be a lot better off than having government do it for them.
You have 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are no really any short-term solutions. That's a problem for the fishermen. Just to go to, I have to address small craft harbours for a moment because I mightn't get a chance with my colleagues here to say another word. So, Mr. Minister, you realize that in 2005 they felt, and you felt too, that they needed $470 million to put the wharves that we are responsible for back in shape. And that's 2005 figures. Now, it's my understanding that when you approach government, it's not going to be those kind of figures that you're going to be looking for. I think it's vitally important, looking at the financial situation of the day and looking at the financial situation when the $100 million was put in over 5 years is 2 different days. I urge you, please, on behalf of the fishermen, to make sure that you ask for adequate amount of money when the money is there in order to make sure that the wharves are put back in proper shape. Now also, Mr. Minister, on the regulations, I know it's been addressed here, I very much hope that you will, and Transport will come before this committee and not have these new regs put to us and the fishermen. I know we have to deal with safety issues, but we also have to have input from fishermen. And sometimes, like an example of throwing the big males back.
And I appreciate that, Mr. McCauley, but we have to deal with time issues here, and you are way over time. So perhaps if we give the Minister a very quick answer here.
I'll be very brief, Mr. Minister. In relation to the transport regulations, it is certainly transport, and I would suggest you invite them here because there are things in relation now. I think a lot of people are afraid there's more involvement for them than there actually might be, keeping in mind safety first. In relation to 2 comments, that no short-term solution, I certainly didn't say that. In fact, in relation to the PEI summit, they are reporting early in the new year. The Quebec summit reports the 1st of February for the very reason so we can have something put in place for the coming season. That is being done. The $400 million is certainly a problem, but in relation to the mess that we're trying to deal with and all these problems in the fishery and the amount of money that we're behind small craft harbours, I would remind you that I didn't create that, I inherited that, so others have to take some of the blame for the position we're in.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Blais.
Yes, but you had the solution, Mr. Minister, in terms of the small craft harbours. So if you didn't create, or you may not have created the problem, but someone did, and I'm not searching for the guilty parties here. I think there are many, but we're looking for solutions. So in terms of short-term solutions for 2007, and as far as Quebec is concerned, I'm sure the same question could be asked for other regions as well or other areas. Would you be in favor of helping the fishermen and their industry? Would you be in favor of lowering their fees in terms of their businesses?
One of the things being looked at in relation to this summit we have set up, it sounds like, you know, an easy way to slough off responsibilities. Actually, it's not what it is. It's a way to bring an awful lot of extra work on yourselves because people have now been brought to the table. Everybody in the industry has been brought to the table. They are all playing a part, the committees that are following. In fact, we left Quebec the other day with 3 committees been set up, one in harvesting, one in processing, and one in, I guess, marketing and commercialization generally. These have a short time frame to come back to us with recommendations of how to deal with the crisis which we face. Undoubtedly, they're going to be looking for something, a quick fix in a lot of cases, because they need it in order to get going for this coming spring, and then more longer-term solutions. So, Mr. Chair, really the process we have set up, which is a collective one, where the advice is coming right from an area, and I just want to state, for those of you who are involved in representing ridings, who can probably tell me what can work in your own riding, that is basically what we try to narrow this down to. Instead of a blanket situation from the Ottawa or from the province, each area has specific requirements. PEI had a great lobster fishery in part of the island, an abysmal failure in other parts. So different solutions are necessary here if we're going to put the fishery on a solid foundation. But I look forward to what comes out of these meetings so we can zero in with them to try to provide some of the solutions that are so necessary.
Monsieur, je répète ma question.
Well, I repeat the question, and I would like to have an answer. Do you support the reduction of operating costs for fishermen for 2007?
To say when I start off, Mr. Speaker, that is, in fact, it was discussed briefly. We have discussed it. We've discussed this last year. You and I have discussed it. And as we move through there, what is the role of the federal department or the federal government? What can we do to make life a bit easier? And undoubtedly, that will certainly be one of the things that will come up. What will we do about it? Well, when we see as it all comes out, we'll figure out what we can do about it.
For 2007, do you also intend to consider a reduction in permit fees for fishermen? For 2007, do you intend to consider a reduction in the permit fees for fishermen, especially shrimp fishermen?
Again, we threw that out, and in fact, we've even thrown a few things on the table that they should consider, including looking at, for instance, setting fees, if these things are possible, and fees are generally set across the board. But unfortunately, some of the fees were set when prices were very high, and when the prices dropped, like the price of shrimp, the price of crab in particular dropped, the fee structure didn't drop with them. But there's a lot more to it than in relation to who has it, how much, what the costs are, etc. Will we look at those things? Absolutely, because I think it's an integral part of solving the overall problem.
Final question. Do you intend to overturn the decision quite recently, just before the forum, concerning the lobster fishery that was practiced by or prosecuted by the fishermen from the Magdalen Islands and the northern shore of Prince Edward Island?
About McLeod's ledge? Yeah, it's the McLeod ledge one. That was a decision just recently made. That's a fight that has been going on for quite some time. No agreement could be reached. We try to solve many of our problems by bringing the people who are involved together and let them work it out. It's always better than imposing one. In this case, it couldn't be done. We brought in somebody to do an independent study, agreed to by all parties. The person came in with a solid report. The report we have accepted, and that's exactly where it lies at this time, and we have no intention of changing that. Are there other things we can do built around it? Absolutely. In fact, some things are already in motion. But that decision itself was made based upon an independent recommendation by a person accepted by both sides to settle a problem that they themselves wouldn't settle.
Thank you, Minister Hearn. Mr. Stauffer.
Chairman, I just want to say when it comes to trade-offs of having mining companies use natural lakes for tailing ponds instead of developing their own tailing ponds is similar to allowing a forestry company to log a national park and say, well, we'll plant trees in our backyard. So these trade-offs I always have concerns about. But, Mr. Minister, you just invited me and the thing to say anything that you said, anything you said way back then can be used, I guess, you get in the court of public opinion. Well, I just happened to have the February 5th, 2002 committee hearings, and here's what you said about trust agreements. It goes on, but you said, yet even though it's true, there are many people out there making fortunes, and there's all kinds of manipulation within the system. Usually it's bought by some fish plant owner, some processor who accumulates all kinds of licenses, and as Earl, that's Mr. Earl of the Fisheries Union, has so clearly said, they get a fisherman to sign his name on a piece of paper and then he owns him for life. Then he went on to say, it's simply a matter of the Department of Fisheries and Oceans forgetting about the quick buck themselves, forgetting about looking after their corporate friends who sit around and drink cognac with them, thinking about the people they're supposed to represent, the ordinary average fisherman who should have a clear-cut license if he qualifies, and whose license should revert the minute he fails to be a fisherman or owner-operator. We have too many sitting again, and it's in the report at home, owning several licenses. They're slipper skippers who sit with their feet up, monitor their two-way radios, and talk to the fellows out there making the fortune for them while getting very little out of it themselves. If this continues, the fishery is going to be a real joke in a few years' time. Sir, my question is, trust agreements, two of them were brought up yesterday in the Divgy area by a company. I've asked this question before and I ask it again. Do you hold this view that you did in 2002? And what are you and your department doing about the corporatization of the lobster industry in terms of trust agreements?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I said what I said before, that anything I said in the past I stand by. My opinion, the only part of that I would change slightly is the part about departmental people. I presume I was talking about politicians because my officials work much too hard to be drinking cognac, and as I never had a drink in my life myself, I'm certainly not sitting around drinking cognac. No, I still hold that view, Mr. Stauffer, that that whole situation is in a mess. Again, one of the very first things we started to address when we came to the department, in fact, a tremendous amount of work had been done, except perhaps for some of the other crisis situations that have developed over the last couple of months. This also would now be on the table, but we have moved a long way on that, and very soon we'll be coming forth with suggestions to deal with that. My word of warning, I guess, which I have gotten out to people who are out there buying up licenses thinking, oh, well, you know, the government will grandfather what happened. I'd be careful where I invest my money.
And in final conclusion, I just want to thank you and the department very much for the work going on in the mapping coordination with D&D and others in the far north. I got a very good briefing about that at BIO. It's obviously this needs long-term commitment and funding, but I think the mapping of the continental shelves, and especially the far north with global warming, would go a long way in not only looking after our territory, but proper resources, fisheries, and under the ground in the future. And I thank you and your department for that.
Thank you for that, Mr. Stauffer. And there's a couple of other areas of mapping also. In relation to the follow-up, besides what I mentioned, we're doing the control overfishing on the nose and tail. We presently have a major contract underway to do the mapping in that area, comprehensive mapping of the continental shelf, and we are also working for our case of ownership or control of the continental shelf under the law of the sea. That is also well underway. So there are a number of initiatives being put together to deal with this major problem we have of protecting our territory and our resource. And thank you for the comments.
Very quickly then.
Very quickly.
On the resource management, if Mr. Bevan can explain for us the reduction it shows in the estimates.
Now, that would reflect the sunsetting of the Marshall program, and that is a major component of the reduction for resource management.
Strictly the Marshall one.
Thank you, Mr. Bevan. Mr. Camp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister and officials for appearing today. When we did our study on of the northern cod last year, two of the issues that we wrestled with, I think perhaps the two issues that we wrestled with the most were whether we should recommend to the Minister of the day recreational fishery for cod, And secondly, whether we should recommend the opening of a limited commercial fishery in the inshore. And you and your department have proceeded with both of those, I think. And I just wonder if you could give us an update on how you think those have gone, in particular whether the commercial fishery has, whether there's any sense that it is threatening the recovery of the cod stock in general.
Thank you very much for that question. Actually, in answering that, I'll answer the part of the question Mr. Manning asked I didn't get to. Well, again, the recommendation came from the committee, unanimous recommendation, because I believe we, as I did myself, believed it was the right and proper thing to do. To me, the summer was a tremendous success. It did a couple of things. Number one, it gave us a very good idea of the concentrations of inshore codfish, of the rebuilding of the bay stocks, as we call them, and it gave a tremendous amount of people a feeling that they haven't had for years, a feeling that they could finally get on the water again where they grew up and sort of experience what a lot of us have experienced over the years, from the older people, and I've heard from a lot of them, to the very young, older people saying, I was so delighted to let my grandson or granddaughter experience what it's like to be on the water and catch a fish. These things are very important, but we do have to remind ourselves that these can only continue as long as the resource is stable. We're in the process now of analysing the information we got in relation to concentrations, in relation to size, migratory patterns, what we found out, etc., to see if we, in order to answer the other part of Mr. Manning's question, can have a similar type of fishery next year. I would think if you asked the Newfoundland members who are here, they will certainly agree with you that I would think they got a lot more positive comments from people on this initiative than they did negative ones. Basically, as I say, when we analyse the information that we have, we'll know where we're going. We had 100% cooperation. Very few people abused the system, and I think we came in under the amount, actually, that we really thought or had allocated to be caught. If it turns out to be a failure, the amount was so small that even though it might have stymied growth or whatever, it certainly wouldn't have done irreparable harm. So we really didn't have too many pangs of conscience over taking a chance on this initiative. We'll have an idea if the stocks are growing enough and have grown enough to be able to maintain this type of initiative on an annual basis, and we'll know that very shortly.
Okay. From a more general perspective, looking at the estimates and the supplementary estimates as well, if there's anything that concerns me, it's the relatively small amount of money that we're spending on the oceans agenda, and where the responsibility that the department has as one of the departments to proceed with that, and in fact there's sunsetting money there as well. So in 2007, 2008, it looks like a pretty small amount of money to me to make any kind of progress on the action plan. And so I'm just curious on your response to that, and perhaps Sue Kirby's as well.
Mr. Chair, I'll ask the officials to address that. I have a time-sensitive call. It should only take 5 minutes or less. So by the time, hopefully, you finish dealing with this issue, I can be back again.
Go ahead. I would say I think that's an excellent question. It is a concern. We are trying to move forward with integrated oceans management, and it is happening across the country, and there's buy-in from all levels of government, from communities, from stakeholders, and we have to maintain the momentum. You correctly indicate that the current funding for Ocean Action Plan Phase 1 actually terminates. It was $14 million a year for 2 years. As per some other initiatives, certainly the Minister is seized of this one and will be trying to move forward with an initiative to continue the progress being made on integrated oceans management so that ultimately we achieve it in all Canada's ocean areas. It is essential as part of the answer to some of the fisheries challenges and other challenges, as you're aware as well.
No, thank you, okay. Mr. Murray. Thank you, Mr. Camp. everyone, we're trying to keep people to roughly 5 minutes, but roughly 5 minutes, pretty well averaging 5 minutes and 30 seconds there. So Mr. Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to welcome the Minister and his officials, even though the Minister stepped out for a minute. I just wanted to, and I don't know who will answer this, the Minister's statement, he alluded to the fact that there's been an increase in enforcement staff on the West Coast, I think, from 162 to 176 for 14 increase, and then an additional 12 new habitat monitors. So that's plus 26 positions on the West Coast. But then when I look at a departmental or budgetary chart, I guess you call it full-time equivalents, FTEs, I guess is what it means, sort of revised for 0607 to 0809. For 0607, you're showing 10,490, going down to 10,447 in 0708, and then down to 10,385 in 0809. So that's a decrease of 105 full-time equivalents, if I'm reading this correctly. 43 less next year and 62 less the year after. So even though the Minister is saying you're increasing your numbers by 26 positions on the West Coast, it looks like you're in a decline across your departmental numbers for the next 2 years. So how do you explain that?
But part of the challenge the department has faced for the last few years is actually living within our means whilst addressing recommendations coming from various, and certainly this committee has been quite vocal in the needs of the Coast Guard, the need for fishery officers, the need for science and scientists and so on. So it's a bit of a balancing act in trying to move forward in a manner that puts the resources where I think Canada and Canadians think they should be. In terms of the specifics of those numbers, we could get back to you with an analysis, but certainly we are trying to increase, for example, fishery officers. That increase in BC still has to be followed up with boots on the ground. So we've just graduated one class. There are 2 more groups of fishery officers going through another, well, we would aim for 30 per class. The first element of those will go to BC. I think the second tranche will largely go to Newfoundland and Labrador. So we are very definitely, the transformational funding, the $99 million, is focused on core delivery and not on administration. So an overall number like that, those could be reductions in administrative support staff or whatever. But I can give a more detailed analysis of that, and I think we owe an earlier question on the habitat program to Mr. Stauffer. I can give what we have increased in BC and so on, and we have done some additional fishery officers over where we were going, some additional habitat monitors in Central and Arctic, but I think the issue of where the habitat biologists landing in this increase and decrease piece is something that we owe you a detailed response on. So perhaps we could go away and come back with a detailed analysis of those numbers, but certainly to be clear, the Minister's direction has been crystal clear. Wants to see more fishery officers, wants to see more science, more scientists, more money on Coast Guard, more money on Coast Guard vessel time. But we have to live within our budget, so there would be some reductions. And actually, in the last 3 years, we've reduced the department in overall terms by more than 300 FTEs to try to move money from salaries to actually service delivery.
Thank you for that, Mr. Murray. To the Minister, in your statement, you alluded to the aquaculture infusion of funds on the South Coast with Cook Aquaculture and your department and the provincial government, which is tremendous news, and I want to thank your department and yourself for your interest in that. I know you've been quite involved with Cook Aquaculture, so I applaud your efforts in those efforts for a very economically depressed region as a result of diminished cod stocks particularly, but other fish resources as well. No doubt this will have a big impact on that region of the South Coast, with the closure of the Harbour Breton plant by Fishery Products International, the closure of the Fortune plant by Fishery Products International, ongoing negotiations between Fishery Products International and the FFAW regarding the reopening, hopefully, of the Marystown groundfish plant. I guess my question, I asked you this some time ago, even though we're going to see aquaculture farm fish there, which will make a difference, if indeed negotiations fail, which we hope they don't, we hope they resolve themselves quickly between FPI and the union, there's a tremendous amount of groundfish resources that are allocated to FPI that's not been utilized for a significant period of time. and really could complement, I guess, farm fish for the communities that have traditionally used this groundfish quota. So would you share with the committee what your thoughts are on this in view of the length of time it's been since those groundfish quotas were harvested, and there doesn't seem to be a resolution. So I'm wondering if you could share with the committee your thoughts on this.
Yes, to a point I certainly can. It is one of the major issues facing the province in relation to utilisation of resource. I personally have said, and rightly so I believe, up until now, that we were not involved in what was going on. You had negotiations between the province or between the company and the union. We would not interfere. We wouldn't meet or commit anything to either side to give anybody unfair advantage. We told them to get back to the table and work it out. You had the whole process being complicated by a fact that the company is governed by a special act, the FPI Act. This has gone on for a long time. I will say to you two things. Number one, I have been asked to attend some meetings in the next few days, which bring us into this. I have had earlier this morning a lengthy meeting talking about this, asking these very questions you're asking. We just can't see a resource just sitting there in the ocean. The one thing I will say to you, or will commit to you, is that that resource is there, has been there for, I guess, for centuries, but certainly for many, many years, decades, has been utilized for the benefit of the people along the south coast, and we have every intention of making sure that they continue to enjoy that benefit. Whether there's a deal worked out with FPI or through some other process, but I believe the time has come when we can no longer sit back and let the universe unfold when it's not unfolding. We either have to start creating some momentum or step into the picture. The thing is, this probably has gone on long enough. I think other players feel the same way, and there are some things happening, but certainly the resource itself will be protected, I can assure you that.
Thank you, Minister Hearn. Monsieur Blais.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hearn, as far as the seal hunt is concerned, what do you plan to do on three fronts? In terms of the quota, for the number of seals that will be hunted, to do something to counter the abolitionists' propaganda campaigns, and the last point, which concerns marketing and research at the same time. I think that the industry could benefit from an increase in the quota, but you also have to take into consideration what alternatives there are out there. There is a market, I think, for seal meat. And if you come to the Magdalen Islands, I would be very pleased to offer you some to taste, as I did with the committee members when they came. It is smoked, and also it is made in what we call rillette. It's delicious. So, what is your plan? What do you plan to do on those three fronts?
You raised that question, Mr. Blais, because I believe this is another area where our views and our concerns are simultaneous. In relation to the quotas, do you want me to tell you what I think myself or what is practical? We are, as we speak, sort of assessing last year what happened, the change in climates, etc., if that had any major effect on the seal herds. We have a long-term plan, basically, which we made public, of certain levels where we would do certain things. In fact, I'm informed there's a meeting in January with industry, I guess, and we talk about the quota and the TAC and all that kind of stuff. So that's coming to a fore. we have to be very conscious of what's happening. We have a declining fish stock in certain areas. I think the stocks overall basically have leveled off, but certain areas it's up and down depending on the stocks you talk about. Where we see a diminishing ground fish stock in particular, and we see a ballooning predation group, seals in this case, all different types of seals, different problems in PEI. Like you're having some real problems in PEI. Nova Scotia is also, and complicated by the fact they're in areas where it's difficult to hunt them. I'm seeing seals at the mouth of rivers, you know, eating undoubtedly salmon and trout and whatever. In my own harbour, where if you saw a seal, it was sort of an oddity. You were calling people to look at the seal. Last weekend, 62 just sitting on rocks alone near the mouth of a salmon river. And as Morrissey Johnson used to say, they're not eating turnips. So we have to be very conscious of that and adjust our quotas to keep the herds in control, in check. Counter-propaganda, I was in Norway just a couple of weeks ago. Norway is also a major seal hunting country, as is Russia. We don't hear much about them. We're the ones that are targeted, particularly in Newfoundland and Quebec and the Maritimes. So we have been working with them as we've been with the provinces. We've met with, I think, all the seal hunting provinces to try to coordinate pushback, to get the right information out. I've been in Belgium. I've talked to parliamentarians there. We had parliamentarians here last week to whom you people spoke. I understand that some people look at things differently. The ones I spoke to certainly did when we finished. Norway is solidly on side. Iceland, to a degree, they're more concerned with other mammals, but certainly they are supportive. We, again, like with our overfishing, we have to utilize our international friends. Norway is also a major market for some of our products, a major market. In relation to your the marketing of the product and research, I totally agree. We have to put more money into research for utilizing the whole animal, and certainly as it comes to the meat. In relation to the invitation to eat it, I would certainly say that I have many times in the past. It was either that or cod, and sometimes you accepted the seal as an option. We have potentials there. It's a matter, I think, of zeroing in. But again, I believe you will see some of these recommendations coming out of the summits, because it certainly was an issue in Quebec and it was an issue in Newfoundland.
Thank you, Minister Hearn. Mr. Stauffer.
Thank you very much. And correct me if I'm wrong, but is it not possible in the future, when you get the estimates, that when a program is sunsetted, like the Marshall decision, that could be asterisked on the bottom, so that we would know, if that's possible?
My view is that the frustrations that the committee experienced would be really welcome in terms of improving the document, because the document is produced for your use, and if it's not useful, it should be fixed so it is useful. So any of those kind of comments and the discussions we had a few weeks ago, we really should try to improve the document so that we have discussions about the facts. So I think that's the next.
Okay. And on the previous question of the MTCS budget showing a fairly decent decrease over the next couple of years, I was wondering if you can explain as to why that is happening in the estimates.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yes, I think what you're seeing in the estimates is we're in the middle of a major capital investment in the MCTS centres to upgrade the equipment and to refurbish a number of the sites. So what you see in the estimate is those planned capital expenditures, and of course the decrease goes to when those projects will be finished. And I'll certainly verify that there's no other aspects of that are a factor, but my understanding is it's just the distribution of capital expenditures.
Thank you. And Minister, as you know, you were on our committee when we recommended before. No, you weren't. You just came in 2000, but we had recommended that the United States has something called the Marine Mammal Protection Act, which denies us the ability to sell steel products into the lower 48. Yet Alaska is allowed their Aboriginal people to sell their steel products into the U.S. I'm just wondering, has DFO, or through Foreign Affairs or through international trade, had an opportunity to address that situation, which was in our report several years ago, so that we can have a fair system in this regard.
I'll let Mr. Bevan or whoever just fill you in on something that might have been done, but you certainly reminded me of something. We over the last few months, again, as you know, the House has been open basically since the election, and with the minority government and the problems we've had, or challenges we've had in the department, we've been pretty busy, but we've done a fair amount of international stuff on overfishing in relation to NAFO, in relation to the UN, and with other issues such as the shrimp tariff, etc., which, as you know, we got some headway, a 40% increase or so just last week. But here is an avenue that might be well worth pursuing. But Mr. Bevan, you might want to add to that.
Yeah, we have in the past pursued that with the United States in our bilateral sessions. Recently, we haven't focused on that. We've had other bilateral issues with them around the Machias Seal Island, cooperative work in NAFO, and other agenda items. And the other issue there was the markets were very good for the pelts, so we had no trouble selling the pelts coming from the seal hunt. We've had hundreds of thousands of animals used and sold in other markets at a very good price, and that hasn't been a major focus for us in the most recent meetings with the United States.
And my final question for you is, I heard, is, we battled about custodial management, and now we talked about the bottom trawling on the high seas. Would it be possible to either get monthly or whenever these reports come up, because I know you said you're in negotiations with other countries, but if there are certain goalposts and deadlines that need to be met in terms of the protection of the nose and tail and Flemish cap, if the committee can receive those sort of as an update as we go along, that would probably prevent a lot of questions and misunderstandings about the procedures of what's happening. Because I know a lot of folks in Newfoundland and Labrador are still concerned about what's going on in the international high seas, and I think those updates would be very helpful for our committee, and I thank you for coming today.
Well, thank you, Mr. Stauffer, and again, a very good suggestion. We can certainly let the committee, or have a report which I can make available to the committee members on what is happening, where we see a decrease or an increase or whatever. The thing is, part of the problem in Newfoundland is we have some people who are completely and utterly irresponsible, and one of them being a former minister and now a senator, who continuously talks about the 100 Russian trawlers that are out off our coast type of thing. I mean, we see very little activity. If we could control the fishery inside our 200-mile limit today, as well as we can control it on the nose, tail and Flemish cap, we'd be in very good shape. Things have come a long way, but starting the first of when we see the cooperation we're getting even from countries like Spain now, before the requirements kick in, but as of the 1st of January, any countries who step out of line in relation to illegal, unregulated fishing, overfishing, misreporting are going to pay an extremely heavy price. And I believe, added to that, of course, the resolution at the UN, that we have gone a long way to solve that problem. However, we have to make sure we are the ones who will continue to manage that by the presence of our Coast Guard, and that's why when we talk about losing jobs and so on, our aim is to enhance the Coast Guard to the point where we'll be adding rather than taking away. Our presence in the north will depend heavily on Coast Guard. So I see an enhanced role for Coast Guard rather than a diminished one. And if we talk about custodial management, a term which I guess nobody ever defined, we have a scenario now where we have a management regime outside, basically the same as we have inside, and we can manage that with our forces if we keep them in place, our Coast Guard and our aerial surveillance. So basically, we have the tools now, and we've made the progress to do the job, and I think it would be only fair to let people know where we've come.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, we'd be happy to work with the clerk and come up with some kind of a reporting format and sequence or timing that would work for the committee. I think it's quite important.
And I think our committee members also understand how difficult it is to negotiate in a public forum as well. But to the minister and to our witnesses, thank you for appearing today. If we could, we had one final question from Mr. Shipley, who sat very patiently through this 2 hours and would like to get his question in before we rise.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Minister, for coming out, and appreciate that opportunity. I just want to go to one of the initiatives that have been announced, the Atlantic Salmon Endowment Fund. And then there was an initiative, I believe the Fraser Basin initiative that had come out for us. I'm just not sure the amount of money, somewhere around $10 million. Is there a linkage? Can you just give a quick synopsis of the connection between what the Atlantic Salmon Endowment Fund would be and what this one might be in terms of having one on the East Coast, West Coast?
Not really. We had already an endowment fund on the West Coast. There is a Pacific Coast Endowment Fund. We have been using that argument, I guess, to get one for the Atlantic coast, which we now have. The initiative in the Fraser Valley, even though I said there's no connection, there is in the sense it all goes to protecting our salmon, the wild salmon in particular. You have a lot of groups, and we've met them, on the West Coast who pride themselves in protecting the salmon. I think for a while they were going, like all of us, in different directions. Now they're all coming together. One of the players that we've worked with very closely is a fellow by the name of Rick Hansen, the man in motion, who's done a great job in protecting and promoting the sturgeon and enhancing the sturgeon stocks on the Fraser. And I had the advantage a couple of weeks ago of spending some time on the Fraser with him and a number of others, including First Nations people and our own officials, members of these various groups. They have come together to try to develop, to bring everyone to the table, to try to develop a proper procedure for managing the salmon in the area, protecting, enhancing, getting everybody around and cutting out these wars we saw every year on the Fraser River. I think we've come a long way. We've put $10 million into that initiative. They will be raising tremendous amount of money themselves, have major commitments. And to me, I'm really pleased with what I see happening on the West Coast.
Thank you, Mr. Shipley. Thank you, Minister, and to our witnesses. Before our membership rises here, we did have a request from the World Wildlife Fund to appear at our December 7th meeting. We could slot them in. So if we have agreement from our committee members, that would finish our study on seals. Agreed? Agreed. Thanks again to the Minister and our witnesses from the Department for appearing today. Adjourned.
Thank you, folks.